Well, now I'd like to go to Greg Cassidy, who is building the HO scale model for the Motrak build. As you know, Motrak, we've got 4 separate modelers building the same kit in 4 different scales. And Greg is building his in HO scale. So Greg, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jim. So tonight, I'm filling in. Clark is under the weather and he was going to be presenting tonight, but we'll get him back on once he's back on his feet. I'll be doing part 4 of the Motrak model build along, and this is the HO scale version that I'm doing. And part 4 is going to be adding the roof and the cupola and a couple other odds and ends like that. The first thing that I did was add the corner trim onto the cupola end walls and then trimmed it to the correct angle. One of the things about the kit that I really like, the roof panels actually have scribing on them for the shingling line, so you don't have to draw them on with your pencil. Once I put the trim on the ends, I assembled the cupola, and it didn't need any bracing, so I just put a little bit of square stock in there to hold it together while the glue was setting up. And then I filed the bottom ends to be flush with the angle. Then I started on the shingles. These are some real nice cedar type shingles that come with the kit. And one of the things that I like using are Copic markers. You could also use maybe some stains or some pastels to color these, but Copic markers work great in this. Copic markers are alcohol based and they're translucent, and you can use them just like a marker. They have a very fine tip if you need to, or a broad tip. And because they're translucent, you can layer stuff on and make them darker the more you use them. So this is how my shingles came out once I started cutting them. And then I just applied them to the roofing pieces following the lines and using some canopy glue. Once I was done with that, I painted the underside of the roof overhang. And after I had put the shingles on, I had a little bit of a bend in the roof, so I let it sit like that overnight just to take the bend out. The next day I went ahead and glued one side of the roof onto the building, and I used some weights to hold it in place. If you remember the kit, the roof is a lot longer than the structure because it goes over part of the shed on the platform as well. And then I glued the other side on, again using weights, and I also used the weights to hold the rafters in place as they were drying. And that helps to hold up all the roof together in one nice strong assembly. Excuse me. Then after that, I used an angle gauge to get the measurement of the roof pitch, and I made a couple pieces of trim to fit on the cupola once I put it on the building. Once I had the roof glued on, you have your valley down the middle here. So I just used a strip from the cedar shingles. I colored it with some more markers and then glued on the cupola, and that's where my trim is. The next thing I wanted to do was add a stovepipe to mine. Mine's converted into a coffee house, so they have a little kitchen in there. So I just put a stovepipe that I had put a pin into, drilled a hole in the side of the cupola after weathering it with some pastels and pencils, and then glued it in place. The last thing as far as attaching the roof is the support posts for the overhang on the platform. I have a whole set of stains, and I have strip wood that I've stained with each one that I keep marked. So it's easy to just pick whichever color I want and then pull that stain out. So I went ahead and stained the pieces in the Hunter line brown, Cordovan brown, I think. Now, those pieces were fairly thick, especially for an HO kit. Don't usually deal with strip wood that thick, but since these are posts, I wanted to make sure I cut them flush. So using the Ultimation slicer, it's easy to get a nice slice with it ended up flush at the bottom. And then I was able to glue it on the underside of the overhang. And that's it for attaching the roof and the cupola and the shingles. My next presentation will be part 5, but that won't be for a few weeks. We'll still have Bob and Phil and Clark doing their part 4s.